and rural is different from urban. Commissioner Chenoweth comes from urban, which is District 3, which is Albuquerque, and they deal with a lot of different things than what we deal with here. And I just want to say that whether it's urban or rural, we're here to develop partnerships with all the entities. That's the only way that we're going to get through things. In small communities, it's got to be the counties with the schools and with what other entities are there partnering together and sharing resources. And the same goes for us. We want to partner with everybody too, and we want to share our resources where we're able to. So always know that you can give us a call whenever we're accessible. That's one thing we're always going to be, and we're accountable. So we appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would express appreciation for District 4. It's a great district, great group of people to work with, and I just want to say thank you for all of them.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, also on the list is Mr. Sai or Commissioner Trujillo from Colfax County.
Welcome.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Cabinet Secretary, fellow board members. Just wanted to thank you all for coming up here today, having your meeting. Also wanted to extend my hand out, and as far as Colfax County goes, know we're always here to work with you and in the future and everything. And my constituents have really benefited from the New Mexico DOT, and I wanted to thank you guys for that, from your grants for helping paving roads to building bridges to even the tailings from when you're redoing roads. It's a huge help to our county and the constituents as a whole. One of our big drives for our commission for Colfax is the Rural Air Service Enhancement Grant that we recently applied for. And it's directly going to benefit the Moreno Valley here, along with Angel Fire. So hopefully we'll be receiving this, but you'll see that this is the community here today that will be affected, along with Eagle Nest and others. I just wanted to comment on what Scott Berry had mentioned about I-27. That's going to be a huge benefit to rural America. And being in the planning phase, I want Colfax County to be the shining star and the success for the DOT and the governor. So planning that out, I know to work with her agenda, even figuring out into the future, planning EV charging stations, or all this could go to help everyone, and we would just like to be a partner with you all and the governor. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for showing up today, and thank you for attending our meeting. It's appreciated.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I don't mean to put her on the spot, but Representative, if you'd like to say a few words, it'd be a pleasure to hear from you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Again, my name is Representative Day Hockman B. Hill. I represent District 15, which is in Albuquerque's North Valley. It is absolutely gorgeous here. I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I also think that the North Valley is one of the prettiest places too, but I'm a little biased. I'm just here, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Chairman, to introduce myself and talk to you a little bit about the future and why I'm here. I do chair the House Transportation, Public Works, and Capital Improvements Committee, and I am part of a new generation of leadership in the legislature that is very much interested in creating a culture of collaboration and communication, and all of us coming together in state government to do our job, which is to provide for the citizens of the state of New Mexico. In my 8 months as chair of this committee, I have had a fantastic opportunity to work with Secretary Serna, the governor's office, many of you in this room, the district engineers. Shout out to Justin, who is fantastic. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to come together and continue to work together. I think that at times before there's been silos, and the legislature has had a tendency to kind of work in its own sphere. And I'm here to tell you, Mr. Chairman, that that time is ending now. I will be here at these meetings, and I look forward to forging relationships with all of you and doing everything we can to do what we can for the citizens of New Mexico and this really exciting time of transportation and infrastructure build out both in New Mexico and throughout the country. So thank you for hosting me.
Well, before you leave, I just wanted you to know that this commission is focused on employees, and we're also focused on the safety of our traveling public. But on behalf of the commission, we want to thank you for the work that you do up in Santa Fe, because it's the governor and legislators like you that get us the funding to do projects. And so without the money that comes out of the legislature, we wouldn't be able to do projects that we're doing throughout the state of New Mexico. I don't know where we're at now, but at one point we're like at 90 projects, and do you remember, like,
It's a
ballpark?
1.2 billion
1.2.
active projects.
So that just to go shows the magnitude of work that we have going on, and just, I've been traveling all over, and almost everywhere I'm going, you're seeing construction, which is a good sign. But we want to thank you for the work you do up there, and we welcome you to come to any of our meetings or meet with any of us individually, but we appreciate you and the work you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for mentioning that. You do an incredibly important job here as part of this commission, and I'm very excited about the opportunity to learn more about what you're doing, and being able to have that knowledge helps me do a better job as chair of passing DOT's budget and making sure that we have all the funding available for these important prioritized projects. So this communication is absolutely critical, and I'm really excited for the future. Thanks.
Well, we're honored to have you here.
If I can, Mr. Chairman, just to kind of put a plug, because I think one thing that's obvious is that we receive, the Department of Transportation receives tremendous amount of support from legislators. There's no question about that, because roads impact everyone and you. But I don't know how many, and I feel confident in saying, I don't know that any other legislator has invested what I estimate to be 40 at least, time that representative has spent with our teams, literally just asking questions and understanding what we do. We hosted her over at the GO, I think, 3 or 4 times, traffic safety, aviation in general, really what we do, understanding of our finances. And so, you know, I think it's always a sign of respect that our legislative gallery can share committee and subcommittee. But it's another thing when they take the time out of their, their personal time to say, I'm gonna sit with these agencies and understand what they do for the benefit of maximizing, the state resources to help them. And so, she's a familiar face. I think we're gonna get her a badge to get into the office on her own already. But,
I don't even have one.
there you go. And so I think just for the DOT employees in the room, you have a champion standing in front of you, because it isn't just about showing up to committee meetings and 30 days in Santa Fe. This representative puts the time in to sit with us and understand how to accomplish. So thank you for that. We'll be getting to the next session.
Chair, I would like to extend an invitation to come and visit with us at District 4, our district engineer, Adam Romero. If you can, we can set something up, and I'd like to, and we can go over and show you some of what we're doing. So if you get time, we're available. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Is there anyone else that would like to come up and, on public comment? You guys are easy. With that, I'm gonna go ahead and, Morris, turn it over to Morris. I know you wanted to give some welcoming remarks too. Mr. Madrid, the, village manager.
Yes, I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the commission, Mr. Secretary. I just want to say that we share roots in northern New Mexico, and I share a tie to what used to be called the New Mexico State Highway Department, when the trucks were orange and the coveralls were blue. And I cherish that. I had family, my dad Luis, my cousin Max Madrid, you probably have known both of them, retired from there. So it's always been a tradition of a good day's work for a good day's pay, an environment of family. And I still appreciate that today, because although many of them are gone, retired or passed away, that environment still exists. And it's due to the leadership. I've been in government my entire career, and I understand that government is fairly the same at every level. Successful government happens when you have good leadership. and Mr. Adams and you in particular, it's about strength with compassion. That's what government should be. And I personally am proud, and we should all be proud of the leadership that you have in the Department of Transportation today. As far as Angel Fire goes, we are doing something that you will be proud of. We are completing projects successfully and on time, and we are planning for the future. We hope to develop and keep a good relationship with DOT, and we want you to
privilege of working alongside your father, and I worked and I was under your uncle, which was Max Madrid, and he was a very fine district engineer. And so it was through their leadership and mentoring that all of us have gone through that. So you come from a DOT family. You're right. Back in the day, it was Highway Department. Now it's Department of Transportation, and it doesn't matter how you slice it. We got the best employees anywhere. We continue to provide quality service. We provide to do whatever it takes to get things done, to make sure that our traveling public is moving not only safely, but they're moving. And we appreciate you having projects ready to go, because the number one thing that the governor has tasked the commission and every agency here at DOT is shovel ready. You need to have projects shovel ready. If money becomes available, you have projects shovel ready. It's not like the old days where we get money and we call you and we say, do you have a project? Yeah, let me get back to you. The way it's working today is if we call you and you have a project and it's ready to go, we might be able to fund you immediately. If you say, let me get back to you, we won't get back to you. We're gonna move on. So we appreciate what you're doing, and we appreciate your fine work here and all the other cities you've been in. And again, thank you to your mayor.
thank you.
Thank you. Secretary.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, that's all we have for, see if this works. That's all we have for public comment, but before we go on to our first presentation, I wanna make an announcement and share something with the group on the note of, GOT and family, which I think includes an extension to our contractors who are partners with us, but you all may be familiar with contractor Sandbar, Mr. Hossi Sanchez and his brother Frank, who chairs ACNM. Hossi's wife passed away last week. A battle that he shared with me a number of times that took her from him, and so I just want to ask for you all just for a moment of silence on her behalf, and also, of course, if you can keep him, his family, his brother in your prayers and thoughts. But they'll be making their way to Santa Rosa over the next couple of days, where they're from originally, for her services. I just wanted to share that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is there anybody to come up on public comment? So with that, before we move on to number 7, I would just like everybody in this room in District 4 to know that I'm very blessed to be serving with these commissioners. These commissioners have the same goal that I do, and they want to make sure that our employees are taken care of, and that we're doing our best up here to make sure that you guys have the resources and you have the tools, and that we can support you in getting, whether it's more money or better equipment. And so I've never seen a commission that is so focused on employees. In the past, it's business, but we can't get to business without you. And I'm gonna say that over and over, and if you've been to any of these meetings, you're gonna hear me say that 1,000 times. Because I know what it is to sit in those chairs, and I know what it is to sit in those chairs and not be appreciated, not be thanked, and that'll never happen here. So I couldn't do it without this great commission here, and we all have the same goal in mind: is where do we go from here? It's not where we're at, it's where do we go from here? And so we're already charting the ways with the secretary. We're looking at new ways to bring in incentives, and we couldn't do it without the the leadership we have, from the secretary on down, and from the commission that we have here. So with that, I want to go ahead and move on to number 7, New Mexico Rail Runner Express Annual Report. And I know you're going to tell me that every seat in the Rail Runner is full.
We are imagining that.
Oh, okay.
Good morning, Commissioners and Mr. Secretary, and thanks for recognizing Hosse's wife. Hosse and I grew up in Santa Rosa, and we played football together. We're very close friends, so I really appreciate that, too.
You said you weren't too bad.
Well, he was very good, too. He was my backup, but anyway, good morning, Commissioners and Mr. Secretary. It's great to be back with you to share some of the Rio Metro Regional Transit District's accomplishments since we got together last year in Las Vegas. I'm Dewey Cave. I'm the Executive Director of the Rio Metro Regional Transit District, as well as the Executive Director of the Mid-Region Council of Governments. No doubt, most of you are aware that Rio Metro serves as the fiscal agent, and we're responsible for the capital and maintenance of the New Mexico Rail Runner Express on behalf of New Mexico Department of Transportation and the state. The last time I spoke to you all, we were beginning to emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic while increasing our efforts on capital maintenance activities. Rio Metro is also busy moving capital projects from our long-range plan to short-range active lists, taking advantage of some funding that we've got, the Opportunity Federal COVID Relief Funding, as well as some deferred capital maintenance funding that we've gotten from the state. These capital and maintenance projects had been deferred to include things like locomotive overhauls, grade crossing upgrades, design and property acquisition for hopefully a new operations and maintenance facility, as well as some other projects that we're looking at. But at the same time, we recognized that the Rail Runners ridership base had changed and basically had kind of eroded as a result of people working from home during COVID. So Rio Metro staff completed a comprehensive analysis of ridership changes that had occurred to identify how we could continue to meet the new transportation needs of our communities between Belen and Santa Fe. So we introduced operational changes which included additional service 7 days a week, particularly during the midday to accommodate what we call the new, not so traditional commuter schedule. And so we also introduced some discounted fares, and I'm happy to report that these adjustments have really proven to be successful in encouraging commuters as they return back to the office to work. Also, it's also encouraging more leisure travelers. Students and others have come back to the Rail Runner. In fact, I can tell you that of all the changes that we've done, the increased ridership through the years, this additional service has really made a big difference. So Rio Metro didn't really accomplish this on our own. I'd like to really take this opportunity to thank, of course, the governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, and the NMDOT, particularly Secretary Cerna, as well as David Harris, who's the Transit and Rail Division. We've really worked well with you all. Their active involvement has really helped Rio Metro secure funds that are critical for this system, and really supported us when we kind of tried the different passes and ridership changes and things like that, and you supported that, and I think that's really what made it successful. So really at this time, I would like to have our Rio Metro Special Project Manager, Tony Sylvester, present to you a more in-depth view of some of our initiatives, as well as some of the finances that we have and some of our capital projects. Again, I just want to thank you, especially Secretary, for your cooperation and of course your staff. A lot of changes have happened, but I think the fact that we're working closely together really makes us a little more successful. So Tony's going to give you some details and see if you have any questions.
Great, thank you, Dewey. Good morning, everybody. Thank you
Good
for
morning,
having us.
welcome on behalf of the commission.
Well, thank you. Chairman Adams, good to see you again. Commissioners, Secretary Cerna, thank you for giving us some time on the agenda. I know your commission meetings are jam-packed, so I will go through this relatively quickly, but You have a bunch of information in front of you, but I'd like to hit on some of the highlights of our accomplishments over the last year. Advancing the slides, is that through? Moving on to the next slide. The reason we are here is namely because we have MOA between the NMDOT and Rio Metro that calls for us to give you an annual report. There's some specified topics in there, but I'll hit some of the highlights. The important thing about our annual report to you is it really is fed from the Rio Metro budget and capital plan that covers the year 2024 to fiscal year 2030 in this iteration. This capital plan is not only reviewed and approved by the NMDOT, the Transit and Rail Division, but also goes through our board of directors. We have 18 elected officials on Rio Metro's board of directors that work with us closely in evaluating our budget, our capital projects, and so forth. So this is a well-vetted plan, and we're pretty comfortable with the way it sort of has evolved over the last couple years. On the next slide, you'll see some budget highlights. I'm going to give you just a gloss over some of the major changes that we've experienced this year. Revenues of $111 million in fiscal year 2024. The important change is that we have no CARES Act or ARPA Act funding left after this year. So we went from about $23 million in fiscal year 2022 to zero in 2025. Significant change for us, but we're able to leverage those funds and actually defer some of our local funding spending to maximize those impacts. Replacing those funds is the bipartisan infrastructure law funds. We've got some congressionally directed spending funds, some Carbon Reduction Act funds, and some other programs that we have availed ourselves to and will continue to work for these discretionary funds. But as you know, discretionary funds are discretionary, so it takes a challenge. And this is when it goes back to having shovel-ready projects, which we are lining up, as Dewey mentioned. And clearly an uptick in our GRT. Our expenditures this year, $93.1 million. We have a relatively significant capital projects program this year, and I'll talk about two of those after this slide. The operations and maintenance costs, which is our standard cost for maintaining our service, our customer service agents, our engineers, our locomotives, as well as our right-of-way, pretty much has remained stable for the last couple years and is projected to be that way. So that's sort of a pretty basic indicator of our ongoing costs. One thing I always like to highlight is our partnerships with our local agencies and communities. This past year we had $10 million of local projects that's passed through Rio Metro. This is projects like in the bottom right corner you see a pedestrian crossing that's located in the town of Bernalillo behind an elementary school. So the work that was done in the railroad right-of-way was done by Rio Metro for the NMDOT as well as the town of Bernalillo as part of a larger pedestrian project. So there are a significant amount of projects that aren't necessarily Rio Metro's projects, but that we do on behalf of local agencies. And we do have some cash and GRT balance carryover, and that's viewed as preciously because we use that for our matching funds and so forth. So we're watching that very closely, especially with the revenue changes. On the next slide, I will just gloss over this one. The boxes in this really show our revenues and the changes that I just highlighted, so I don't think we need to spend any more time on that. But on the next page, with looking at our expenditures, we have some of the boxes outlined, and our operations and maintenance in the top line, you can see in the green, these remain relatively constant over the next couple years and have been over the previous years as well. We have some changes in the sort of components of that, but nonetheless, some steady costs. Going down two boxes below that to our capital maintenance program. These are some of the projects that Dewey alluded to earlier. These are our stated good repair projects. Locomotive top deck overhauls, working on communications and the other infrastructure at our stations along the corridor. This is sort of like our bell curve. We're 17 years into the rail runner operations, and this is when we need to take care of a lot of the stated good repair type activities, and we are accomplishing it. You can see in 2026 these expenditures go down somewhat significantly, so it's good to have those sort of behind us. And then we have the operations maintenance facility, which I will talk about on the next slide. So one of our largest capital efforts this year, and our capital priority for the last 3 years since the implementation of positive train control, is really taking care of our employees. You can see the top right image here is what our yard looks like now. That's actually a very significant top deck overhaul or replacement of an engine. We do this outside, exposed to the elements, and our staff work outside all year round. Obviously, you know, the rain and the cold and the heat are a problem, but when you're doing work like this, the blowing dust, and we know New Mexico is a significant issue. This slows down our process, and not just that, it makes very unpleasant working conditions for our staff. Over the last 2 years, we developed a concept and engineering plans and are working on property acquisition at this point to develop a new operations and maintenance facility, which will not just improve the efficiency of our operations, but also improve the working conditions for our staff. We are halfway there in our funding, and we will continue to aggressively seek raise and congressionally directed spending as well as ICIP funds for this project, and we appreciate the DOT's help in sort of supporting those efforts in the past. I think we'll be more successful this year since we've advanced our project. On the next slide are 2 other projects. We talk about shovel-ready. We started these about 3 months ago, and these are nearing completion now. One is in the North Valley near Alameda Road, and the other one is in the South Valley by just north of Isleta Pueblo. These are simply put passing zones. A lot of our track is one track, means one train, one direction at one time. That really slows down our performance, especially with Amtrak and BNSF using our facilities. It creates quite a few conflicts and delays. These improvements will reduce those delays, improve on-time performance, and potentially decrease travel times throughout these stretches. Both these sidings should be online early in 2024. Moving to the next slide, just to make you aware, we do have a capital improvement program that we submit to the state's ICIP. Just to emphasize the importance of the operations and maintenance facility, this is number 1 on our list, and then we also have a siding down by Berlin, which would reduce some competition with Amtrak, blocking our lines in the south part of the corridor as number 2. Moving on to the next slide, do we emphasize the importance of our operations and service changes? These have been extremely successful in encouraging our past ridership to return to the Rail Runner, given the different time and work schedules that people have, as well as additionally getting some additional support for ridership on the weekends for special events and so forth. One of the changes that we found particularly important at this time of the the return to work are discounted fares for monthly passes. Simply put, the monthly passes didn't pencil out if you were only traveling 3 days a week. With the discounted fares, they certainly do, and that's really proving well to get our regular commuters back on the Rail Runner. We want to make sure that they don't forget about the Rail Runner as a travel option, and we want to keep people off the highways as much as we can. On the next slide, Chairman Adams, you talked about our partnerships, the DOT partnerships with the community. We have slightly different types of partnerships here. We work closely with community and economic development organizations throughout the corridor. These are some of the events that we've, I guess in the last 2 or 3 months, have organized in partnership with the City of Albuquerque, with International Folk Art Market, bicycle groups, and so forth. So we work very closely with our marketing agencies to not just advertise for these folks, but in some cases develop joint passes where you buy one pass to the Rail Runner and then you get into the International Folk Market together. So it works for both parties. It simplifies things, and I think we had over 700 tickets for the National Folk Market weekend. So very helpful, and they've been successful for us. And it expands the value of the Rail Runner beyond just commuters. And on the next slide, I think this is one of the last slides, thank you. We talked about the return of our ridership. I know on the screens this doesn't show very well, and I apologize. Fiscal year 2023, we had 550,000 trips, over 27 million passenger miles traveled, pretty much all along the Berlin to Santa Fe corridor. So that's a significant amount of traffic at largely peak hours that's not on I-25. For those of you that can't see the graph, this is our ridership looking at current levels. I think the last late date is June 2023, comparing it to fiscal year 19, our baseline. The red line is New Mexico Rail Runner Express at over about 82% of ridership recovery. The dark black line is U.S. commuter rail overall. And the other lines, which aren't visible on the screens, but hopefully they are in your handout, are peer systems in Seattle, Washington, D.C., San Diego, and so forth. So we are well on our way to recovering, and we hope to sort of exceed 100% very shortly, especially with the return to work. So with that, in closing, we will continue in 2024 to really take good care of the state's assets, making sure they're in good operational conditions and state of good repair and operating safely. We are really working on increasing the capacity of the state's infrastructure along the rail line for not just the rail runner, but also for Amtrak and BNSF. And we're doing what we can to really entice passengers to come back for commuting as well as other purposes. So with that, that's all I have, and I thank you for your time. You're very welcome. Sure. Mhm. Well, the very simple end, yes, yes, yes. Mhm. Okay. Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, I'll try to give you a brief answer. This is obviously a very large topic. Back when New Mexico, when Rio Metro Transit District went to the voters for a gross receipts tax initiative to fund the rail runner, we put forth a package that was designed to keep passenger fares as low as possible. The reason for this is we recognize the income levels of the rural communities along the corridor. We recognize the distances that people have to travel. The voters by 60% approved that gross receipts tax package, and we've been really doing our best to try to maintain low fares. The fares will, I don't think really ever cover the full cost of public transportation. But I ask you, I guess, respectfully, is to ask the same question about the highways. Look at the revenue that they're generating versus the expenditures that are made on them. We do have other revenue streams that come in through the rail runner. So we have the fares. We also have marketing revenues. We have Amtrak fees. We have BNSF fees coming through the corridor. So roughly put, a third of our revenues for the rail runner come through these local sources. A third comes through federal sources, and a third comes through capital funds. So it's a very complex funding package, and we do look at the fare increases. So this fare decrease that we are offering, we always figure it's more important to have a full train or closer to capacity than it is to try to sort of inch out another percentage point of fare box return. But we are in the middle of fare box return depending on how you look at it. You can look at it per mile, which we are low because our trips are average of 45 miles per piece. per trip. So when we look at the other costs associated and revenues and benefits of this, including environmental impacts, keeping safety impacts, people off the highways, reducing accidents, so it's a very expansive question. I'd love to talk to you about it some more. So apologies if I went off. Yeah. Yeah. It is. Yeah. It generally operates on par with other commuter rail systems. Yes, yes, simply put. For commuter rail, yes. So I should have stuck with the easy answer.
And based on the density of the population that we have, I mean, the higher the population density, you know, the less the subsidy, but we're in the ballpark with the other communities. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, we're also wrapping in the capital expenses too, as opposed to just general operating expenses, so.
I would like to commend you for the report. Thank you so much. Thank you for eloquently answering the question that Commissioner Taylor had, which is an important one to understand. Your report here is very comprehensive. Is this available to the public online somehow?
Commissioner, Mr. Secretary, we do have our full report, the budget and capital plan, posted online, as we do every year. I don't think the report to the State Transportation Commission is posted online, but we can easily do that.
Yeah, I just think it would go a long way to answering other people's
Great.
questions as well.
Well, we
Thank you.
will get that on next week. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from commissioners? If not, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. Good to see you guys both.
All right.
Appreciate the presentation.
And thank you very much.
A couple questions, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not too.
Do we? Well, okay.
The total cost of the operations and maintenance facility, you have a range there separated by 25 million. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I can.
I don't know if there's a bronze package and a silver package and a gold, but why that discrepancy on this cost estimation? Because you seemingly would have enough to start that low end now, right?
We do. Mr. Secretary, thank you. That's a good question. We initially came in with, if we're gonna, I think like many public agencies, we heard about COVID relief funds and how easily accessible they would be. We thought this was a good time for us to develop a plan that addressed our future needs, not just for 5, 10, 15 years, but got it all done on one project. The concept that we developed at that point was the $50 million project, and that was developed about 2 years ago. Because we learned that these funds are much more challenging to get, especially for a project of this type, we ratcheted that back and said, let's look at our basics, let's get our staff and employees out of the weather, and then build on from there. Since we already achieved $23 million, we're going to look at this next raise campaign and try to complete that funding package, and I think we'll know relatively soon which path we go.
Mr. Chairman, just full disclosure, I think what we're doing to help the rail runner more recently is staging a car accident on La Bajada 3 times a week. And asking that people just take the train instead, so we'll bill you for that. But ultimately, I would like for us to sit down and look at the agreement that we have. I think suffice it to say, you know, Rio Metro essentially maintains the state assets, and I think you made that point at the very end, right? You know, we own the train, we own the rail, and they're providing the service of, you know, commuter rail service, but fundamentally the infrastructure is ours. And we just, you know, I've seen the agreement. I think there's opportunities to tighten and strengthen the partnership between us so that there's not so much liability sitting on one side of the equation. And so we want to see you successful. We've contemplated even at the DOT, and I know you're working tirelessly to get, you know, the internet up and running on a consistent basis, is leveraging, you know, productive time on the rail runner to encourage state workers to get on it if they get credit for working on there while they're commuting. So, you know, we'll try and be creative to encourage, you know, ridership, certainly among state employees and certainly among DOT employees who, you know, happen to get off in our parking lot. So we look forward to seeing how that materializes.
Secretary, we will have a positive announcement here shortly about the internet. We've finally got a system that we're really comfortable
Sounds
with.
good.
so.
And
We,
we
uh,
thank you also for increasing the gas prices. That helps us out quite a bit too, so thank
We
you.
appreciate your participation, we appreciate your report, and we look forward to seeing you on the next trip. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
all. Thank you
Real
for what you do.
briefly, the secretary brought up a good point that I don't want to get into, but since we have our chairman from the transportation here, at the last tiers meeting that I was able to attend, there was a question that came up. He brought up staging an accident there on La Bajada Hill. But I wanted to bring this up, is that I think maybe this legislative session, that we all need to work together to figure out how we can make those work zones safer. I don't know if it's increasing the things, but I'm telling you right now, I've been traveling a lot. La Bajada's a perfect example where you're supposed to be going 55 and they're going 85, 90, and it's becoming dangerous. And that's not the only work zone that they're speeding in. So I would just say, if our people, and we could work with your committee and everything, and I think that it was a concern from Tiers too, that we look at ways, because we have employees in those work zones, and it doesn't have to be a construction work zone by a contractor. DOT has their own work zones where they're doing patching and guardrail and stuff of that nature. So I just wanted to bring that up since you brought it up. And with that, I'm gonna move forward to our District 4 presentation, which is Adam Romero. And Adam is our new district engineer up at District 4, and he's hit the ground running. And he got mad at me the other day because he said because he became the district engineer, he's already spent a lot of money on suits and ties and shirts, and
Yes.
that's part of the game.
That's correct. I think I need a raise already. I'm broke. Good morning, Chairman Adams, Commissioners, Secretary Serna. Welcome to Angel Fire, New Mexico. As Chairman Adams said, I am Adam Romero, and I am the District 4 engineer. I've been the District 4 engineer for the past 2 months. I think the last commission meeting we had in Ruidoso was my first week as District 4 engineer. So I think the honeymoon period is over for me already. So even though I've been the district engineer for the last 2 months, I have been with District 4 for over 20 years. I've been to many commission meetings over my years. One thing I want to point out is I remember there was a time when commission meetings were somewhat unpleasant, and these days these meetings are very pleasant and they're very enjoyable, and that's to you, Chairman Adams, due to your leadership on the commission. We do thank you for that.
I appreciate that.
I know last week we did spend some time driving District 4. We had a ribbon cutting ceremony, and we looked at some of the concerns throughout our district. And me and the chairman, we had a very good day out there, and we thank you for your support and your guidance that you provide to us. Today, I do want to recognize our District 4 employees that are attending this meeting today. I know they're all sitting in the back, but if our District 4 employees, if you could stand up.
Adam, if not only stand up, what I would like to do, because these are their meetings, I'd like for them to stay standing, and we're gonna stay standing. And if you don't stand and we don't call your name, then you're on leave without pay. Let's start right here, and we'll go down each row, and I want everybody to introduce themselves and the area they work in. Gabe?
Gabriel Lucero, District 4, District Engineer for Engineering Support Group. Secretary Roberto. Okay, Juan Manuel Service Center. Kevin Reedy, District 3.
thank all of you. I always say this, we all have a different role, we all have a different job that we do at DOT. And I asked somebody one day, I'm gonna change it a little bit, and I said, I'm gonna switch it to sports and analogy, and I asked somebody one day, when I used to go to the cruise and visit with them out in the field, I used to ask them, what's the most important position on the football team? And guess what the majority of people said? Quarterback. And I said, that's not true. And he said, well, it's the quarterback that makes or breaks the game. And I said, it's every player on that field that will make or break that game. If the receivers don't catch the ball, the running backs fumble, if the defense can't hold to get the ball back. And my point in that is that each and every one of you play an important role. You're all a piece of the puzzle. And if there's one piece missing, and we can't get things done. In our case, all the pieces are in place, and I appreciate that, and I thank you for that, and each and every one of you play as an important role as the other. So thank you, and Adam, I'll let you continue with the presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, D4 employees. These are very hardworking employees, and these employees are the reason that District 4 is a successful district. I also want to thank our employees that couldn't be with us here today. As you know, District 4, we're in the northern part of the state, and winter's coming soon, so we're taking advantage of all the good days we have left before the weather changes, so we still have a lot of employees out there. We have some major patching operations. We're trying to get caught up and finish our mowing operations. We have our chip seal operations still going. We have our construction folks wrapping up some of these projects, so a lot of our employees are out there and they're busy today and they couldn't be here today, but I just wanted to recognize them also.
Thank you.
With that, we could start the District 4 presentation. Good morning. I'm Adam Romero. I'm the District 4 engineer. I want to welcome everybody to beautiful Angel Fire, New Mexico. Today, District 4 is hosting the State Transportation Commission meeting. I want to welcome our chairman, Walter Adams, and all our commissioners. And also, I'd like to welcome our Cabinet Secretary, Ricky Serna, and everybody who is in attendance. I also want to thank the Village of Angel Fire for having us here today and for hosting us. Mayor Joe Mixon and Village Manager Morris Madrid. District 4 consists of the northeast quadrant of the state of New Mexico. We are grateful to have Chairman Walter Adams as our commissioner. Walter's an experienced ex-NMDOT employee. He worked for the DOT for many years, and he worked in District 4 for many years. Walter genuinely cares about the employees in District 4 and all the people that live in District 4. And he's always there to support us with anything that arises. For that, Chairman Adams, we thank you. Now, I'd like to introduce our District 4 executive staff. Our Assistant District Engineer for Construction is Mr. Chris Urioste. Our Assistant District Engineer for our Engineering Support section is Mr. Gabriel Lucero. And we just recently got a new business manager, Mr. Lawrence Martinez. For fiscal year 23, District 4 had a total budget of over $40 million. District 4 currently has 352 employees. So District 4 is a large district. We're a rural district, and we may not have a lot of people, but we do have a lot of roadways. We have large portions of I-25, we have a large portion of I-40, and we have many US highways. The district maintains over 6,300 lane miles. We have 16 maintenance patrols, 5 project offices, and 4 special crews. The district also has 6 rest areas and is made up of 7 counties, which are Colfax, Guadalupe, Harding, Mora, Quay, Union, and San Miguel. The district office is located in Las Vegas, New Mexico, which is our biggest municipality. And now we move on to legislative funding. In 2019, we received $34 million, and we used them on a couple of projects, one being New Mexico 39, which is north of Logan. We used $21 million on this project. It was a major roadway rehabilitation, and we did some drainage improvements. In 2019, we also received $14.8 million for contract maintenance projects. One of the biggest one was a pavement resurfacing west of Clayton on US 6487. In 2020, we received $20 million. We completed all the projects listed with this $20 million. We spread them out throughout the district. One of the bigger projects that was completed that year was a pavement rehab mill and overlay on I-25 north of Huatros. In 2021, the district received $28.2 million. $7 million of that went to a roadway preservation project on I-40 in Quay County. Most of these projects from 2021 have been completed. We still have a few that are in the construction phase, but they're getting close to being completed. In 2021, the district received some American Rescue Plan funding. We were able to acquire $9 million for roadway improvements on New Mexico 39 in Harding County. Now, in the year 2022, the district received $37.6 million. Most of these projects have been completed with the exception of the Raton Pass Phase 3, which we were able to get $25 million for this project. It's a mill and overlay project, and it's the third and final phase of this pass. Now I want to discuss some completed construction projects over the last couple of years. The district has completed over $92 million worth of projects. One of the biggest projects we completed was the Logan Bridge. It was nearly $25 million. We also completed 434, Phase 2 of Coyote Creek. That was about $21 million. 434, we have projects scheduled out there for a couple of years. We have 4 phases. We have completed 2 of the phases so far. This corridor was very dangerous because it was very narrow. We have a lot of commuters that use this roadway. It's hard when 2 cars were coming because we had only 1 lane. Our plows even had trouble clearing the snow during winter events. Now I want to discuss current ongoing construction projects in District 4. We have about $70 million of projects. One of the big ones right now is Raton Pass Phase 2 at a cost of $22 million. We also have a project on US 64 Palo Flechado. It's a roadway rehabilitation. Its cost is $28.5 million. We have a couple of upcoming major construction projects. We have Phase 3 of New Mexico 434, and we also have a roadway and bridge rehab on I-40 near Palomas. Here we have a listing of the completed maintenance projects that were completed over the last year. We have a total of $14.2 million of projects that were completed. A lot of them were fencing projects or resurfacing projects. We had some recycled milling projects and some hot in place recycle projects. These were spread out throughout District 4, and they have all been completed. We have some upcoming maintenance projects. We have $12.8 million worth of projects coming up. We have some extruded panel signs that are going to be replaced on I-25. We have some resurfacing projects. We even have some roadway jacking that's going to take place on I-25. These will be coming up this next year. In fiscal year 2023, District 4 performed 261,000 lane miles of snow removal at a cost of $4.3 million. We've been consistent over the last 3 years with this number. Our winters have been somewhat mild, but we continue to get a lot of ice storms and little small storms that really cause havoc on our roadways. So we're constantly having to treat our roadways, and that brings up the cost of this operation. So as we all know, in 2022, we had the biggest wildfire in the history of the state of New Mexico. It was the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fire. The majority of the wildfire was in District 4. We have some upcoming and some ongoing maintenance projects that are related to this fire. We have completed guardrail replacement on several routes in the district. We did have about $1 million worth of guardrail that was burned during this fire. Currently, we're replacing a lot of burned fencing on several routes. That project is ongoing right now. We had several routes that were impacted and damaged by this fire. A lot of these routes were rural routes that were chip-sealed roads and didn't receive a lot of traffic. But during the fire, we had a lot of heavy loads, tractor trailers pulling large dozers, and we had some heavy water trucks that were traveling through these roads, and they caused a lot of damage. One of the routes was New Mexico 266. We do have a project to overlay this road with recycled millings. Another one is New Mexico 94. We got $3.3 million. In the future, we will be asking for more legislative money to address some of the other roads. Now I want to talk about our statewide transportation improvement program. For fiscal year 2023 and fiscal year 2024, we have a combined amount of $85 million for projects. One project that I want to call out is I-40 in Quay County. This is near San Home, and this project is going for approximately $19 million. We also have years 2025 through 2027 programmed. Now I want to talk about our Transportation Project Fund. For fiscal year 2020, we received over $9 million worth of state funding. One of the projects I want to point out is a bridge replacement in Quay County that went for over $3 million. In fiscal year 2022, we received over $27 million worth of funding. We distributed this money throughout the district through the different entities that applied for this money. Two projects that I want to point out are the two projects within the village of Angel Fire. One of them is Country Club Drive in St. Andrews Way, and the other one is North Vale Avenue. These projects combined to be a total of about $2 million. In fiscal year 2023, the district received over $16 million of funding. A couple of projects that I want to point out are roadway improvements on University Avenue in the city of Las Vegas for about $2.5 million. And also in Mora County, we had a project for $2 million for improvements to El Alto and Camino del Medio Road. This TPF funding is funding that these entities would never be able to acquire if it wasn't for the state of New Mexico. We assist them with 90% of this funding, and their match is only 5%. So now I'd like to talk about our local government fund. For fiscal year 24, we received $4.2 million, and this money went to assist county co-ops, municipal co-ops, and school district co-ops. This money helped improve county roads and school bus routes. This was distributed throughout District 4, and these are additional examples of how important our partnership is with our local communities. Now, we come to my favorite part of the presentation, employee recognition. District 4 has many outstanding employees, but today we are going to recognize some of our special employees and their achievements. For 2022, the District 4 Best Patrol is the Wagon Mound Patrol. They received this award based on the condition of their patrol, the condition of their roadways, and the condition of their equipment. In addition to doing a great job within their patrol, they also stepped it up last year, and they assisted the patrols that were affected by fires and floods. Even though the Wagon Mound Patrol wasn't affected, they were still able to assist without it negatively impacting their area. These guys have stepped up big time, and I know we can always count on the Wagon Mound Patrol.
It's nice that we get a little bit of recognition. We hear it all the time. We go to the gas station there in Wagamon. We run into anybody. We're real good with the community. We communicate with a lot of them, and we hear compliments every day. I mean, I-25 is our priority area, but these rural areas, a lot of people tend to forget about. We can't forget about them out here because these ranchers and the community out here depends on us to keep them going.
Our District 4 Employee of the Year is Walter Esquivel. He's our highway maintenance worker, advanced with the Las Vegas Patrol. I've known Walter for many years, and one thing about Walter is I know we can always count on him, no matter when or where. He's always willing to assist other crews, whether it be snow removal, removing flooding debris. Walter always steps up and he's always available. He is an ideal employee for our maintenance section.
I'm just a worker, that's it. No, I'm always there whenever they need me, you know. I help other patrols if they need help. And I'll show you a letter they gave me. I don't really like to say anything about myself, no. Because I just like
What
to
did
work.
they say in the letter?
I'll let you read it better. Yes.
Our Supervisor of the Year is Mr. Lawrence Lujan. He is the project manager for the Tucumcari Project Office. I've known Lawrence very well. Actually, he is a classmate of mine. We went to high school together. One thing I know about Lawrence is that he is a very quiet guy, but his projects are very well managed. Even though Lawrence doesn't say much, I see his correspondence and it's always very professional. Through his leadership, he is able to address any issues that arise on his projects in a timely manner.
Yes, everybody that knows me knows that I'm pretty quiet. I really don't talk unless I really have to. It's just the way I am. Basically, it works for me. Like I said, treat people with respect and they'll respect you. I get my point across to the contractors, so I don't have to be there yelling at them, or that's not my style. So
Our team of the year is the Las Vegas Project Office. The project manager for this office is Mr. Joe Ledger. The Las Vegas Project Office has had many challenging projects and they always step up. They deliver these projects on time and within budget. They have a very good relationship with the contractors that we deal with, and they have a very good relationship with our Federal Highway Administration. No matter what issues arise, whether it be staffing issues or equipment issues, they always find a way to get their projects done.
Communication's key. You talk to everybody, you communicate, it's key. I mean, and number one is always trust your crew members. Trust your guys. As hard as it is as a project manager to say, are your guys doing the work out there? You trust them. That's the main key. That boosts morale. When one of my inspectors jumps in their pickups and takes off to the project, you trust that they're getting their job done. You trust them.
In closing, I'd like to thank everyone who attended this meeting today. I have been the District 4 engineer for the last 2 months, but I've been a District 4 employee for 20 plus years. What I've come to realize about District 4 is that we have some very dedicated and hardworking employees. We have faced a lot of adversity over the last 2 years, whether it be fires that we've had to deal with, or the continuous flooding that we've had to deal with, or any other issues that have come up. District 4 still operates at a high level, and we continue to provide a safe and reliable transportation system. I hope everybody enjoyed their stay here in Angel Fire, New Mexico, and please come back and visit Angel Fire, and please come back and visit District 4. But I just warn you, if you come back to Angel Fire in the wintertime, be sure to bring a warm jacket and some warm gloves, because it'll be a lot cooler next time. With that, I look forward to the next commission meeting, and I look forward to seeing everybody again in the future. Safe travels, and thank you very much.
It's great to see that we're getting, hopefully we'll get more generations coming in. I met somebody the other day and said, yeah, you worked with my mom, you worked with my grandfather, and again, it's amazing. But I want to thank each and every one of you that received award today for the excellent job that you're doing. And you know that word that you said, Joseph, trust. It's not only trust. You got to remember that here at DOT, whether it's in construction, maintenance, or whether it's in the offices or wherever it's at, we're a family. And sometimes we spend more time with each other than we do with our own families. So it's not only trust, it's a love that we have for each other. And I'll be honest with you, that I always say this, that when I was here, it was survival, check to check to check, and that's why we're trying to make it better. And we appreciate you being here, because with the talents that all of you have, you could be working somewhere else. So with that, I just want to say thank you. And before I finish, I just want to, Gabe, you look sharp today. That's the first time I see you without a hat.
Take a picture.
So with that, what I would like to do, unless you have something else, commissioners, you have anything?
Any questions, anything?
Okay. What I'd like to do is take pictures, but before we take the pictures, let's take a 10-minute break. And I'm gonna run over there real quick, and then we'll come and take pictures while everybody else is getting back, okay? So.
Testing.
gonna have everybody get in their seats so we can continue the meeting. I would appreciate it. And, before we continue, I wanna give a big shout out to Travis Martinez, who put everything together and had a big hand in everything we did. Travis thought I had forgotten, he wasn't talking to me, so I hope he talks to me on my way out. We're gonna go ahead and continue with the secretary's report. And included in that will be discussion of the 2024 legislative priorities. Morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I just want to make, before I move into my presentation, I want to provide a few updates, recognize a few individuals that are here, and then put some dates on your calendar. First, I want to start off, I think she's here. Is Kim here? Where's Kim? Did she step out? Okay, we'll go to her in a little bit. I do want to thank Mershawn. As you all know, Mershawn got promoted to a new position within DOT. We didn't give her a choice. She had to still help you guys, though. So she's been kind of double dutying for us. Now that she's learning a new role at the GO, she's continued to provide support to you all. We've moved through the interview process. We're now starting to hire. We're going to hire someone. We have identified a candidate that we'd like to bring on board to replace Mershawn and her role in supporting the commission. And so we look forward to introducing you to that new person at your next commission meeting. And probably even until then, Mershawn will be kind of, teaching her the ropes. So I just want to recognize Mershawn. It's a lot of work what she does, kind of coordinating the setup for the meetings, the meeting minutes, and making sure that your packets are put together and you have them timely. So just a shout out to Mershawn for all that work. Cool. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I also want to recognize Kim Gallegos. She's normally the PIO for District 3. She does a great job. She's got a lot of, she's just constantly busy, right, knowing what goes on in District 3. She's been acting as the comms director or the agency's PIO for the last several weeks. And I want to thank her. You may have already heard, and it certainly is in the paper, that we've made an offer and we'll be bringing on board a replacement for Marissa. Her name is Christine Bustos Milhalsik. She's the comms director and clerk for the city of Santa Fe currently. So she'll be coming on as our comms director on October 1st. But since Marissa's departure, up until then, Kim has been holding down the fort for us. So I want to thank her and the rest of the comms team because they kept it together. They haven't missed a beat. From everything that you see here to the videos that we put out, the press releases, and of course, staying on top of all of our branding. So I want to recognize Kim for her work. Thanks. And I don't know, I'll do you too much, Chairman, but according to Kim, we've known each other even longer than you've known her. She said that we were in elementary together. I don't remember her, so she means she was definitely part of the cooler group, so that's probably why. Yeah. That's third grade too. All right. All right, so a couple. You guys are gonna get So a couple of dates. Yeah. Couple of dates to put on your calendars. On October 16th, we are taking the lead on planning the Governor Symposium on the Future of Transportation. It's October 16th in Albuquerque. We'll be sure that you get the official save the date and the registration link to that event. The governor will be present as the keynote speaker, and we'll really focus on how transformation, its infrastructure development is transforming over the next several years. Next week, beginning Tuesday of next week in Albuquerque at Expo New Mexico begins our statewide equipment rodeo competition. So on Tuesday, Wednesday, and early Thursday, is the statewide competitions, a roll-up effort from all of the district rodeos. And then on Thursday evening at 6 o'clock is the award ceremony and banquet. And so we hope you can make it out to that. It's a lot of fun, and I'll be there, so I look forward to seeing you. Last year I did the same thing basically because I live in District 5, so I send out a shout out to District 5 and District 5 won. So, and so, yeah, that's right. So that's what I'm trying to say is I put a shout out to them, they won, everybody was like, what happened there? And I'm like, it was legitimate, trust me, we did good. Yeah. Okay, with that, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'm gonna, my presentation today, I thought it would be timely to kind of go through what we've been working on from a legislative strategy perspective. It kind of dawned on me because Commissioner Taylor was in Rules Committee, a couple weeks ago. I was there with him. He was moving through his confirmation process, and I think there were a number of questions that I think kind of really stem from how the legislature can help us and what are our priorities and what do we need to do. So I know many of you are going to go through that process as well, so I want to be sure we're kind of in lockstep with what we're going to be talking about beginning in January. I do want to again say that Representative Hockman-Vigil has been integral to these discussions. I think from a strategic standpoint, she's been a kind of a mentor in ensuring that we can pull a whole lot of this stuff off. So with that, let's go to the first slide, and I'm going to start off with kind of just a high level of how the agency, generates its budget. And I'll make sure you get a copy of all of this as well. So NMDOT's operating budget is really a sum of our tax distributions, AKA the State Road Fund, and our federal apportionment, right? And so the largest distributions from the tax base include gasoline tax, special fuel tax, weight distance, and vehicle registration fees. And then in a little bit, you'll see that motor excise tax is the fifth largest, and a little bit about what we're going to do there. But when you get this presentation, you look at it, and we're highlighting here. So if you take, for example, gasoline tax. Transportation, and that money then becomes the state road fund. And so the key point to take away from this, that bottom sentence is New Mexico Department of Transportation does not currently receive any recurring general fund from the state. And so that puts us in a unique position because as we start to see, increased cost of doing business, increased cost of construction, increased cost of staffing, administrative fees, etc., we essentially have to rely on increases to our federal apportionment, which is rare, and two is increase to tax distributions, right? And sometimes those things push and pull against each other because, as gas prices go up, for example, fuel tax revenues, either stay flat or they could go down as people commute less and drive less, visit the state less, things like that. And so this chart right here essentially shows you how the funds for our state road fund are generated. And the state road fund, by the way, essentially becomes our operating budget for a number of administrative functions. Again, those top 4 major road fund revenues, just to see a table of them right over here, right? You see them here from gasoline, weight, distance, special fuel, and what we're projected to do over through 2027. So we see these being fairly healthy right now, which is a good thing. This last legislative session, there were some bills that were passed and signed into law that did affect some other distributions to the agency. For example, you know, the fees, court fees, license, the fees associated with getting your license back will impact some things like traffic safety, but this is what our projections show. And then again, the fifth revenue source, largest, would be motor excise tax currently, which is at about $60 million in FY24. Next slide, please. So that was the state side of things, and so here is the federal side of things, right? So each year we receive our federal apportionment and funding, and it comes with a couple of things that you have to consider, which is an obligation limit and a 20% non-federal match, right? The 20% I put an asterisk next to it because that's what it equates to depending on the program, but it kind of balances out to 20%, which means that if you look at our state revenue, which we just went through, and you'll see in a little bit how it adds up with our federal revenue, that 20% of that, of course, is necessary to match our federal apportionment funding. And you kind of see on this table what it's doing. We see steady increases, of course, going all the way back to going all the way back to, my date back there is 2012. And so the thing you have to remember is we get an apportionment, but then we get an obligation limit, right? So it's the equivalent of saying, here's $1, but you can only spend 80 cents on this dollar at this point, right? And so if you see on the left-hand side, some of these, the funding builds or the funding measures, they change with federal administrations, right? So currently right now we're receiving funding under the bipartisan infrastructure law. And it is for the first time providing increases year over year in federal funding. It's 2%. It's not significant, but it's appreciated. That equates to about $2 million, or $12 million from last year to this year. All right, next slide. This one will kind of show the sum of, I think, go back one more. This one kind of blank. Huh. So on this slide, what you'll see is just a table that'll show like one on top of the, I know you guys are messing with my slides over there. But in that last slide, what you'll see essentially is kind of the stacked federal and state funding, right? So you'll kind of see that sum of those two revenue sources totaling just over, 1.2 billion, something like that. Go ahead and go to the next one. All right, so so that's kind of just a general overview of our operating budget. But some additional things that kind of play into our legislative strategy go back to 2019. Beginning then, the Department of Transportation has received, more than 1.6 billion in non-recurring general fund, but about 1.5 billion to support priorities like maintenance, litter pickup, construction equipment, local airport infrastructure, rest areas, wildlife, and other local road infrastructure support, which is essentially support for the Transportation Project Fund. And so on this table, what you'll see is appropriations from Section 9. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Section 9 essentially has become since 2019 a special section in the back of House Bill 2 that provides the Department of Transportation with non-recurring general fund revenues. And so you'll see there essentially what came by way of appropriation, what we've expended and encumbered to date. But what we essentially do with Section 9 funding is what the legislative language requests for us to do. So Section 9 will come with appropriating language. They will indicate whether this funding be used for litter pickup, beautification, maintenance equipment, and when it's being used for construction, it'll also name construction projects, or what we refer to as earmarks, meaning, here's, $300 million, but we would like for you to use it on these roads, all right? So that'll give you an overview of Section 9. So if you go to the next slide, the point that we've been making over the interim is our financial capacity. And so even though you see that the Department of Transportation is slowly, our operating budget is growing, we want to talk a little bit about financial capacity because a lot has happened in our industry over the last few years, especially on the heels of, reopening the nation's economy after, the COVID shutdown. And so what this table right here shows is our operating budget plus Section 9 allocations for construction, equipment, litter, and maintenance. So you'll see going back here to FY20, our operating budget, which was federal and state, was about 970 million, and then we received another 275 million. And so you'll see kind of starting at the bottom how our operating budget has increased from 920 million to about 1.2 billion in the last 4 fiscal years. And our Section 9 funding, has, kind of stayed, on the average about 280 million, give or take. But what we're pointing out here on this table is what escalation costs are running us on average, right? So if you go back and look at our letting schedules over the last couple of years relative to 3 or 4 years ago, we're using a conservative number, about 20%, right? Basically, it's costing us 20% more to do the work that we were doing 4 years ago today. And we're using that as a new norm. Even though our letting schedule is showing stability, it's not showing stability relative to 3 or 4 years ago. It's showing stability between what we're getting in terms of bids and what engineer estimates are. So we're in a new place now of construction costs, right? So if you look at FY24, even though our total of 1.4 billion in operating budget and Section 9 funding is higher than any other years, the escalation costs are running us about $300 million, right? So it's costing us $300 million just to do today what we were doing 4 years ago in construction, right? Well, if you look further to the right where it says earmark projects, of that 1.4 billion, 109 million of that funding was isolated for earmark projects, meaning that when we get Section 9 funding, the legislature is also saying, we want you to work on this and this and this and this and this. How do I kind of put that in simplest terms, right? So let's just say you work for DOT and you get a $30,000 a year raise, right? And you say, this is great. And I tell you, yes, but I would like for you, before you spend it on anything else, buy some of this and buy some of this and buy some of this. And you're thinking, well, that $30,000 really now is only like 10 after I buy all the things that I was asked to buy. Now, not that we don't appreciate that funding, because we do, but DOT has critical priorities, right? That we essentially identify through a number of measures need to get done. They're priority projects. We use our TAMP, we use our STIP plans, we use other measures like the TRIP report to identify where do we need to prioritize our projects and our funding. So when you take into account the escalation costs, our earmarked projects, right? One of the other measures that we've had to absorb the cost for over the last 4 years is pay increases. So every time the legislature says, all right, 3% increase to employees, 4% increase to employees. A couple years ago, it was on average 7%, and we're estimating under 4%. Every time that the legislature gives pay increases, that funding, because we don't receive recurring general fund, comes from the state road fund. So the state road fund becomes the operating budget to support those. So in the last 4 years, it's compounded to about $37 million, right? And so when you take all those things into consideration and other things, for example, capital projects, whenever we need to maintain one of our buildings and facilities at the Department of Transportation, that capital expenditure comes from the state road fund, right? And so we have the second largest square footage footprint of any other state agency, second to only corrections. And so when we need to maintain our facilities, again, there comes from the state road fund. So when you factor in all of those measures, our financial capacity today is basically equivalent to what it was 3 or 4 years ago, right? When you take into what it costs to do business today. So we see this increase in revenues, that's great, operating budget, non-recurring general fund allocations to us, but when you take out what it costs to do business these days, our financial capacity is kind of holding flat. So if you go to the next slide, what we're trying to do to kind of address some of these things starts during the interim. So in 2019, right, what's been happening is the legislature, in their generosity, they start finding non-recurring revenue, peeling it away from anywhere else, and bringing it to the Section 9 table. So what essentially happens is, beginning in committees like House Transportation, legislators say, we want to support the Department of Transportation, and we can do that with non-recurring general fund. Let's create a bucket of money and get them some additional resources to do their work, right? And that's come for a lot of things, from equipment to air service, just like I said earlier. Well, last year, my first year here at DOT during the legislative session, it became a little tricky. As you recall, we were at the Capitol in January, and the LFC recommendation for DOT non-recurring general fund was disappointing, right? It was $70 million, all right? And in our conversations with LFC, we asked, why was that rec so low? And, their response was, Well, from where does this money come, right? You have an executive rec that accounts for a lot of spending, right? And this legislative rec, which is different, but equally expensive, so to speak. And so what that forces the legislature to do during the course of the session is say, from where are we going to get that money to fund DOT? And as a team player, in this administration, the last thing that I want is for the legislature to go take it from another executive priority, right? Well, let's go get it from this agency. Let's go get it from that priority. Let's get it from this governor priority, right? And so what we're working on now is getting our Section 9 funding in the executive rec. We essentially want, for when the governor releases her budget, for her to carve out the resources needed to give us Section 9 funding, right? And not just the resources, but the language and the priority projects that the district engineers have identified for their districts, right? And so that does two things. One is it ensures that the resources are already carved out in the executive rec, but two, because they're carved out in the executive rec, when legislators do that process of finding resources, they also move through the process of saying, well, we would like for them to work on this, and we would like for them to work on that, and we would like for them to work on this, right? And so that makes sense, right? If a legislator is helping us find resources, it makes sense that they would also say, we'd also like to attach this priority to it. So by pulling this money out of the executive rec with our language, not only are we hopeful we can be successful in securing the $540 million that we're asking for, but with the language and construction priorities that we've identified as an agency. So in addition to construction and maintenance, we have $10 million for the purchase of equipment, $10 million for beautification and continued litter pickup efforts across the state, $40 million as part of a package of bills that would support hydrogen fueling development in the state, and $55 million to support the continued EV infrastructure build out in New Mexico after our ARPA, capital, and NEVI plan is done. And so this is essentially what we're working on to secure the non-recurring general fund. Next slide. The second big priority for us comes by way of recurring revenues for the DOT, right? And so last year, in 2023, the legislature considered legislation. There were two separate bills on the House and on the Senate side, and then this measure ultimately made its way into the tax package. But what it did in a nutshell was it took whatever was remaining of motor excise tax that is currently going to the general fund, and over a couple of years, it moved those resources to either the Transportation Project Fund and the State Road Fund, right? So what we're working on doing is a standalone bill in the coming session that would fast track that logic. And essentially, instead of over 2 years, we would move that money to the State Road Fund and TPF, is we would do it all in one fell swoop. We would introduce legislation that would change the distributions of motor excise tax, 75% of it going to the State Road Fund, which would increase it by $145 million annually, and 25% of it going to TPF, which would increase TPF distributions by about $17 million, right, for local owned projects. So this is big for us. We expect that there will be another tax omnibus bill in the coming session, but we don't want for DOT's distributions to get tangled in all of that. So we'll be running this as a separate bill so that it doesn't get lost in the shuffle, right? Next slide. Now, on top of these things are other big priorities for us that we're working on. As we discussed during our budget rec approval, we would be securing $4 million in recurring general fund to support the Transportation Regulation Division transfer to us. So that's going to be the first instance in which the Department of Transportation receives recurring general fund. We like that. It does come with the additional work of overseeing Transportation Regulatory Division, but I think we're doing a good job planning for that. But by getting the first wave of recurring general fund to DOT, it opens up the possibility for us to get recurring general fund for other things outside of transportation regulation, right? So it kind of cracks the door open. So that's already in our budget request to the executive, and we're hopeful that that'll come our way. We're also working right now to identify critical statutory changes needed for that department transfer to DOT. And so we know that as our legal team, and they work with the PRC legal team, as they identify the necessary rule changes for this transfer, They may also identify some statutory cleanups that we can do all the while, so we may work with the governor to get those changes on the call. We also are going to be looking at fuel tax replacement. As you all know, electric vehicle or let's just put it this way, all vehicle manufacturers in the nation have pretty much said by this date we are going to be EV, right? We know that it's coming. Some are more aggressive than others. And again, with the investments we're putting in EV infrastructure build out across the state, we expect that over time we're going to need to plan for fuel tax loss as a result of hybrid and electric vehicle use. And so last year we introduced legislation that would add a surcharge to the registration of EVs and hybrids, full EV and hybrids. Because our registration fee structure is codependent on age of vehicle and weight, we know that the weight of the vehicles will be accounted for in that matrix, but the surcharge will essentially aim to capture the fuel tax loss. And so we worked with some interest groups to negotiate what those surcharges should look like, and this is what we arrived at as a consensus measure last year, so we'll be introducing legislation to do that as well. And again, going back to our limited capital outlay resources outside of state road fund, we're working to request $25 million in capital outlay for critical priorities across the state. As you can imagine, with our design offices, our patrols, 82 patrols across the state, our district offices, et cetera, we have a lot of need. And so we'll be submitting our ISIP in the next couple of weeks and working with LFC and the executive to ensure that DOT gets the capital outlay support it needs to maintain our facilities. We'll also be working with the executive on language that provides general fund support if the legislature does give another pay increase. So again, if the legislature issues a 4% increase, that'll compound on top of other past increases, which is now at that $37 million amount. So we'll be working with the executive to say, hey, just because these agencies don't receive general fund, nothing precludes us from saying here's money to support those pay increases for those workers. And so we're hopeful that we can get that language in House Bill 2 so that if that 4% increase costs us $18 or $20 million, we can get a percentage of that in general fund support so that it doesn't all come out of the state road fund. We're also very sincerely interested in replenishing our Rural Air Service Enhancement Fund, RAISE Fund. That was something the mayor and the commissioner talked about this morning. This essentially is a measure that subsidizes the cost of bringing passenger service to municipal and county-owned airports in the state. This past year, we received about $55 million to help with the infrastructure build-out in those airports. So I think that this positions us to leverage on that capital investment and increase, visitor spending to the state of New Mexico by way of air service to rural parts of the state. And then lastly, of course, you all know that over the past 3 years, the state of New Mexico has passed legislation to develop wildlife corridor plans, strategies, and the development of wildlife corridor fund. And so we've been asked by several legislators to work with them on identifying what kind of resources would be necessary to implement the wildlife corridor plan, which is really like a $500 million investment in wildlife corridors across the state. And so what we'd like to do is start receiving some support to get some of those high priority projects done. And then lastly, and not on here, but I think equally important to everything that we're looking at, is the state of New Mexico is looking at measures that other states, for example, Colorado, have taken to leverage the funding from bipartisan infrastructure law in creating state match funds, right? Or state match funds, I should say it that way, that allows state agencies to tap into state resources when they secure a grant that requires a non-federal match. And if you take, for example, in the next couple of months, we're going to submit grant proposals that will call, if we were to receive all of them, for $150 million in match, $156 million to be exact. And so we're constantly seeking federal grant funds to support our priority projects, but it comes with that match cost, right? And again, where does that come from? Where does that come? Right now, the state road fund. And so it forces us in some instances to kind of shuffle our priorities so we can free up the state resources. So, for example, in Colorado, they passed legislation that created a fund, they funded it, and now state agencies can come with the language to request match support on any BIL-supported program, right? And we know if we can do something similar to that, DOT stands to benefit most from those funds for infrastructure build-out. So we expect that fund would likely go to the Department of Finance Administration and not to us, but we'd be able to tap into it along with other locals. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. It's all conceptual at this point. We haven't moved to the point of finding sponsors yet and drafting legislation, because your input is valuable to all of that, right? But we wanted you to just be familiar, especially as you move through committees, as conferees, that, if you receive questions about where are your priorities, where are your pain points, that you can kind of hear from us what they are and articulate them on our behalf. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll stand for any questions. Okay. Sure. Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioner, there's no question, Highway 64, I'm hopeful we're gonna be doing a WARD notice, right, to the contractor on 64, and we're even excited about maybe getting out there with Navajo Nation to press conference that out, but you're absolutely right. We're gonna see in excess of 20% in areas of the state, like New Mexico 64 out in northwestern New Mexico, where that's just gonna be the case. A lot of locals are feeling that pinch too. I was meeting with the mayor of Bernalillo, and talking to him about projects ranging from $500,000 to $1.2 million, and getting contractors to bite on those projects, even as close to Albuquerque as the town of Bernalillo is. And then you have smaller projects out in Okeo-Winga in District 5, right, where, they're going to see a cost, they're going to see a bid that comes in 40 to 50% above what their estimates are for those projects. So there's pain points for sure, where in rural parts of the state, contractors feel as though it doesn't position them right for their next job, or their access to resources, materials, even lodging for their workers. But 64, I think it was the third time was the charm with 64, right on the bid, third time. And we're fortunate we're going to move to a place to award it, but you're right, it's going to be a costly project. Right, thank you.
Chairman, Secretary, Commissioners, good morning. Thank you for having us. Just have a couple of points I wanted to highlight. Of course, it's September, and this is our end of our fiscal year, and have been working diligently with the department and several of the employees here on making sure we fully obligate all our funds, which is just a couple of weeks away. And just to share, so far we've obligated $474 million, and we only have $100,000 left until we're fully obligated. So we're really close, which is great news. And that includes 133 new projects that you've delivered, and 578 that continue to move through the pipeline, which is also great. So, and that takes a lot of effort. So kudos to Secretary and the department and your team for getting all that done. And that's Right now, I'm just talking, giving you numbers, and we can't lose the fact that it's people that are behind these numbers, and that's really key. And we know, both of us, we've had a lot of vacancies this year, and our people have carried a lot of extra duties, both of our staff. So to be fully obligated and move these projects is a really big deal. So I don't want to lose that point. So thank you. So the other update I wanted to share was that right now we've got 5 Safe Streets for All grants that we're administering right now. And those all belong to the locals right now. And those are 5 grants. And there's been a really hard push to get those agreements finalized by the end of the month. So a lot of those locals will see those grants approved, and we'll be able to move forward. And although that call was in the spring, ask for everyone to kind of keep an eye out for the next spring of 2024 when that call for projects comes out again. And that's a great opportunity if people have any safety needs on the local side, that they can reach out to that. As the secretary mentioned, a key part of that is the match and being shovel ready, as you mentioned, Chairman. So just a couple little updates there. And kind of in keeping with the governor's NEVI, or the electric vehicle symposium that we're going to have in a couple of weeks, I just wanted to highlight that right now the state and locals can apply for the Electric Vehicle Charger Reliability and Accessibility Accelerator grant. Sorry, that's a mouthful. And the administration has made $100 million available nationwide for the state and local governments to be able to upgrade broken and non-operational chargers. And that application process is due on November 13th. So everyone has a couple of months to apply for those. And if you've never applied, or you don't have a grants.gov account, please apply as soon as possible, or register as soon as possible, because it takes a couple of weeks to get that through and get your registration completed. So just want to make sure I promote that item as well. That's all I have. Any questions? Well, we jointly with the department, we try to find, there's always like 1 or 2 projects that we hold out to the very end as we obligate everything that we plan to authorize or obligate. There's always a couple of 1 or 2 catch-up projects, or catch-all projects, as we call them. So once we get to a certain point, it's like, okay, we've obligated what we need to, and if there's any funds that are going to expire, we try to find a place for them. So we've got 2 weeks to do that. So very rarely do we lapse or lose money, so to speak. Yeah. Great. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Great, thank you so much.
How is everyone? Are you guys ready for your joke? Alrighty. Why did the chicken go to KFC? Anyone? Nope. He wanted to see a chicken strip. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I just want to also mimic what Cindy said. I'm not sure if she had an opportunity to talk with her staff, but we have already obligated all of our FY23, federal fiscal year 23 funds, so we should have no problem. We will not be reverting anything, so we are good to go on that front, and we did it all yesterday. So I'm very proud of my team and also the STIP group, David's group. So we worked together and FHWA, and we got everything done. The deadline was yesterday, and we met that deadline, so it's pretty good standings. So this morning I will be speaking with you regarding our FY24 budget. This is as of August 31st. If you look on column B, line number 14, or sorry, line number 23, we're a $1.128 billion agency. Our FY24 rollover is $780.9 million. Although we have asked for bars, we have yet to be approved. They have yet to be approved at DFA. So right now we are $1.9 billion, getting close to that $2 billion mark. Column F, line number 14, we haven't received a full month's revenue yet, so we've only received $57.8 million. And column F, line number 23, we've spent about $163.6 million in road fund. On the next page, this is our restricted revenue. Column E, line number 31, this makes up about $288.6 million. And column F, line number 31, we spent about 13.6. On the next page, this is our cash position. We compare where we were at in August of 2022 versus August of 2023. If you look on item 1, the road fund, we have about $427.8 million in cash. We have $168.8 million in restricted cash for a total of $596.7 million. That's about a $31.3 million gain in cash at this time versus August of 2022. And our last, Oh, sorry. And then our last page is our fund balance. This is where we project to end fiscal year 24. The last column shows on line number 7, $57.8 million in revenue. This does take into consideration all the bars that we have requested so far. And all our restricted funds come out to a negative $12.9 million. That's primarily due to line number 11 and line number 14. That is our federal funds. So basically what we do is we front the cash for those two, and then we get reimbursed by the federal government every month. So right now we are in good standings, and that's the update for FY24. Do you guys have any questions? So far, so good. Yeah. You're talking about the fund balance one? Okay. So if you look on the last page, it says unaudited fund balance. This is where, of course, we're still going through our audit, so this is where we're projecting our fund balance to start with. So for example, if you look at line number 7, $506 million is where we stand right now. Last year, we went in during the session and we took out $71.1 million of our fund balance. So think of that as our savings account. So we took that out only in state road fund. We took out $4.7 million in the HIF, and that was to pay for our debt service. We took out $5.2 million in aviation, and we took out about $8,500 in the ignition interlock fund for a total of $81.1 million of our savings. So that just increases our budget for FY24. So right now, our last commission, John Tennyson, the budget directors, we went in flat. But during the session, we'll go in again and we'll probably bring in about another $65 to $80 million, depending on where our fund balance ends when the audit is complete. Right, it's due November 15th. I sure will. Thank you, guys.
Appreciate that. They make us look good. Surround yourself with people smarter than you. That's my philosophy.
It is. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'm here this morning to ask for approval for our FY24 local government road fund match waiver program. The match waiver program allows the department to distribute up to $1 million to local entities who can demonstrate a hardship. And that hardship is determined by a financial review that DFA does on our behalf. So if you'll take a look at page 99, you'll see a list of entities and projects that were approved by DFA as eligible for the waiver program. So I'm asking approval to distribute $275,117 in match waiver funding to those entities listed. I can come back again. We typically do it in September so that we can have, once their agreements are executed in October, we can get the amendments drafted to give them.
Would it be a lot if we came back and if we have to do a special, if we have to do a special, then we can do it.
No, I have to come back again in November because we'll be doing the transportation project fund match waiver at that time as well, so.
So we will hold off on this as an action item, and you've given us an indicative information only.
All right.
Because it's not here, and that's why you wanted to defer to legal counsel. That's why I asked you frequently, and I said, so, but I appreciate it.
All right, no problem. Thank you.
Any questions or any comments? Thank you for the job you do.
Thank you, you're welcome.
Always good to see you here. Let's go on to the action item, approval of budget adjustment request, bar number 11. David?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, thank you all. This is kind of a little step off of the fact that we've obligated all our federal funding this year. This is actually increasing our budget authority to account for the redistribution funding we got at the end of the year. So just a little bit of context. Typically, it's all around the nation. Some entities, typically it's local entities, can't obligate all their funding, so that reverts back and gets redistributed to the states that have projects shovel-ready and available for construction. So we're fortunate that we were able to get about $75 million this year. Well, $16.5 million in federal funds, 15.1 in state funds for the match requirement. So with all respect, I'm asking that this bar it gets approved, FHWA awarded the redistribution obligation increase for federal fiscal year 2023. Again, this will increase our budget authority by $75.5 million, 60.5 of federal funds and 15.1 of state funds to assist in some projects that we had shovel ready, mainly in District 1, that we were able to get some funding for. But we are ready for next year, and we anticipate probably a similar amount next year as well. So we're continuing to get at least $60 to $70 million extra a year because we have projects that are shovel ready and ready to go. So with all respect, I would request that you approve this bar. Appreciate you.
Both of them? Okay. Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, Secretary. So the first one is bar 12, and this one's for budget authority in the amount of $31.25 million. We received a federal 21 raise grant from USDOT for $25 million. This was for US 64. 21 miles. Its projects includes replacement of 4 bridges, widening, and pavement rehab. And again, the department is responsible for 20% match, and it's supported by state road fund balance. So on this one, I respectfully request bar approval. And then for number 13, this one's a pass-through. This one's for $1.375 million. The department will be a pass-through recipient for the federal 22 raise grant by USDOT for $1.1 million for the city of Carlsbad. It's a planning project that will support planning and design for the proposed new bridge at Boyd Drive and Radio Boulevard. And they are responsible for their 20% match, and I respectfully request bar approval. The bar amount is for the $1.375 million, and it's $1.1 million so it's a total of 1.375. They got 1.1 in the grant, and then the rest is the 20% match. They're putting in all of the money for the pass-through.
No, Secretary and Commissioner, so the way that we do our financials is we have to capture the whole amount, and then we'll back out the match afterwards. They'll be charged that in separately, but for our financial reasons, we have to do it the total.
Excuse me, good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, Cabinet Secretary. I am here to request a bar in the amount of $410,613. These funds are Federal Highway CMAQ funds that reflects to FTA for our statewide van pool program. This funding will be used to pay for those van pool expenses, and this is 100% federal funding. There's no state funding involved. I'm happy to stand for any questions, and I appreciate your time and your consideration of this bar. Thank you.
Move on to action item A, 11A and 11B.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. We've got two items here, commission policies that require action, or we're asking for action on. The first one is Commission Policy Number 22, which provides for the policy statement by the Commission of its priorities in regard to STIP. And this is, by and large, merely cleaning up some of the language with the existing version of this, but it does have one substantive change. It adds as a priority the asset management plan. The second one is one that does not have any kind of substantive change. It's just a cleanup, and that has to do with the bicycle, pedestrian, and equestrian policy, which is CP 66.
Thank you. Is there any questions, comments? You've had a chance to review it. Is there any questions from fellow commissioners? With not, then Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend approval of these changes.
So do I have a motion for proposed amendments to Commission Policy 22, statewide transportation improvement program, and for B, proposed amendments to Commission Policy 66, bicycle, pedestrian, and equestrian policy, CP 66?
So moved.
I have a motion by Commissioner
I second
Chenoweth.
that.
I have a second by Commissioner Lundstrom. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Now we'll go on to Pedro and final rulemaking to amend rule.
So, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, Pedro Real cannot make it today. I'm
Okay.
John Newell. I'm an Assistant General Counsel with the NMDOT, so I'll be presenting this item today. All right. So we are, have an action item requesting final approval for amended, rulemaking amending Rule 181110, which is the Rural Air Service Enhancement Grant Program Rule. On May 18th, 2023, the commission approved opening this rulemaking. The purpose of this rulemaking is at the 2023 session of the New Mexico State Legislature. The legislature approved a change to the Rural Air Service Enhancement Grant Act for increasing the capacity of the increasing the capacity for airplanes that are eligible under the act to 100 persons. So we had to make a rule change to affect that change to the statute. So today we're asking for final approval. We held a hearing on May 27th of this year of 2023, a public hearing, and there were no substantive comments. So we have proceeded with final rulemaking action. So we're requesting today that you approve the final rulemaking action so we can publish in the New Mexico Register and for this rule to become effective.
Fellow commissioners, you've had a chance to review it. You heard the recommendation to approve it. Is there any comments, questions? Mr. Secretary, what is your?
Mr. Chairman, this was a good change to this legislation, and the rule just brings us into conformity, so I recommend approval.
Do I have a motion for the final rulemaking action to amend Rule 18.11.10 NMAC Rural Air Service Enhancement Grant Program?
I make a motion that we accept this.
We have a motion from Commissioner Lundstrom. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second from Commissioner Chenoweth. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll move back to legal counsel.
So these are both informational pieces, that's kind of the first reading of the proposed changes to a couple of policies. One of them is to the Metropolitan Planning Organizations at CP 63, and then also CP 68, proposed amendments to the Commission Policy 68, Regional Transportation Planning Organizations. And these are just for the Commission's information at this point. We'll be bringing them as action items at the next commission meeting. Neither one of these contain substantive changes. They're merely cleanup amendments.
Is there any questions, comments? And this is for review only, so you'll have a chance to review it, and then, are you gonna bring it up for action at the next meeting?
Yeah,
in,
that's what our process has been, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, is we read them at one meeting, and then the next meeting we bring them up for action.
We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
thank
Commission.
you. Is there anyone else or any other business to come before this Transportation Commission? We appreciate everybody's attendance, everybody's patience. We look forward to our next meeting, which will be in Las Lunas in November. And this is everybody's favorite part of the meeting. So, do I have a motion for adjournment of this meeting at approximately 11:19?
I'll make that motion, Chairman Adams.
We have a motion from Commissioner Chen. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
We have a second. Can I get a roll call vote?
Yeah.
Yes.
No.
Hey,
Yes.
tell them to bring lunch, because we're gonna be here. We are adjourned.
All right.